I didn't want to believe in ghosts, but then my wife started seeing one. This is scary. It was the middle of summer and the humidity hung thick in the air, heavy with the promise of an approaching storm. My wife and I had just moved into our new home and were still unpacking boxers when we heard it. A knock, slow and deliberate, came from somewhere deep within the house, followed by what sounded like dragging metal moans. I asked, gripping my wife's hand, seeking reassurance in her presence. She shook her head slightly, her eyes wide. What was that? The sound seemed to echo through the empty rooms, bouncing off unpacked boxers and unhung pictures. We were alone in the house, or so we thought. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by a scraping sound as if something heavy were being dragged across the wooden floor. The hair on the back of my neck stood up and goosebumps erupted on my arms. Neither of us wanted to move, to break the silence first, to acknowledge that we weren't alone. But the knocking persisted, growing steadily louder until we could stand it no longer. With a deep breath, I let go of my wife's hand and began to walk towards the noise, each step echoing my pounding heart. She followed close behind me, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder, her touch a small comfort in the face of the unknown. As I rounded a corner, I saw it. A door at the end of the hallway that had been slightly ajar before now stood wide open. It revealed not a room, but a staircase leading down into darkness. The air grew colder as we approached, sending shivers down my spine. The knocking had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to press in on us. "Do you hear that?" my wife whispered, her voice tight with fear. I strained to listen, hearing only the pounding of my own heart. I reached out, my fingers grazing the rough wood of the banister. As I began to descend the stairs, each step made a loud creaking sound, breaking the silence and sending echoes bouncing off the unseen ceiling above. My wife hesitated at the bottom of the stairs, her face pale in the dim light, filtering through the dusty window at the top. "I don't want to go down there," she said, her voice barely a whisper. But I did. I felt compelled to explore, to uncover whatever mystery lay hidden in the darkness below. The stairs ended at a solid stone wall, leaving only a narrow passage between it and the banister. The air grew colder here, biting at my skin and chilling me to the bone. I pushed on, moving deeper into the darkness, the floor giving way to a thick layer of dust that swirled around my legs. The passage opened up into a large cavern, the ceiling disappearing into the blackness above. In the center stood a single wooden chair, its back to me, as though waiting for someone to sit in it. I approached cautiously, half expecting the chair to spin around, revealing nothing but empty space where a person should have been. But as I drew closer, I saw something lying on the floor in front of it, something that made the blood drain from my face and my knees grow weak. It was a human skull, its empty sockets staring up at me accusingly. Panic surged through me, making my heart pound in my chest like a drum. I stumbled back, knocking over a loose stone that rolled away into the darkness. The sound echoed through the cavern, bouncing off the unseen ceiling and awakening something in the shadows. I turned and ran, desperate to escape the unseen presence that stirred behind me. I raced back up the stairs, the rough wood digging into my palms as I climbed, my lungs burning with exertion. I burst through the door at the top and slammed it shut behind me, leaning against it with trembling hands. I could hear the scraping sound again, closer now, as if whatever was pursuing me was gaining on me. I could feel its presence at the door, just beyond my vision, waiting, watching. I knew I couldn't stay there. So with a deep breath, I pulled myself away and fled, racing through the house, desperate to find an escape. My wife was sitting on the floor in the corner of her room, her face ashen, her eyes wide with terror. "I found something," I gasped, unable to articulate the horror I felt. She didn't need me to tell her. She already knew. I could see it in the way her eyes had widened, mirroring the shock and fear that consumed me. We didn't speak. There was nothing to say. We were trapped in a nightmare from which there was no waking. And as the night wore on, the scratching and dragging sounds continued throughout the house, a relentless torment that drove us deeper into the suffocating grip of fear. We huddled together for warmth, each trying to draw strength from the other's presence, but it wasn't enough. As the hours passed, the temperature in the room began to drop, sending shivers down our spines and making our teeth chatter. The air grew heavy, laden with a suffocating dread that seemed to seep into our bones. And then we heard it, a soft whisper that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. It spoke of unspeakable horrors, of tormented souls, and of a darkness that had taken root in our home. The whisper grew louder, becoming a cacophony of voices that echoed through the house, each one more terrifying than the last. They told stories of unimaginable pain and suffering, of lives cut short, and of souls forever trapped in a state of torment. We clung to each other, our bodies shaking, our minds struggling to comprehend the horrors that unfolded around us. As dawn approached, the whispers faded, leaving behind an eerie silence that was more terrifying than the voices themselves. With trembling hands, we crept out of our hiding place and began to explore the house. What we found was beyond our worst fears. Every room was filled with scratches, as if clawed hands had scraped against the walls in a desperate attempt to escape. The windows were shattered, their jagged edges glinting menacingly in the pale morning light. And in the center of the living room, we found a circle of overturned furniture, as if some invisible force had ripped through the house during the night. We were trapped in a nightmare from which there was no waking, and as the days turned into weeks, the darkness that had invaded our home only grew stronger. The scratching and whispering continued unabated, driving us to the brink of madness. My wife grew thinner, her eyes hollowed with fear. She began to see things in the shadows, fleeting glimpses of movement just at the edge of our vision. She would wake in the night, screaming, and I would hold her as she cried out for help that would never come. I tried to leave, to escape the clutches of our prison, but no matter how far I walked, I could never get away. The house was always there, looming over me, its darkness reaching out to pull me back in. In the end, we succumbed to the darkness, the scratching, the whispering, the fear. It all became too much to bear. My wife and I, once so full of life and love, wasted away in our prison, consumed by the very darkness that had brought us together. And now we are one with the whispers, our voices joining the chorus of tormented souls trapped within these walls forever.